Vilnius by night. An outing without a lantern might end up in prison.
9 o'clock was time for bed. You'd sleep about 3 hours, then get up and do something. Then you go back to sleep for another 3 hours and wake up in the morning. This wasn't some order imposed by a strict regimen, but the nightly schedule of the average resident of Vilnius a few hundred years ago. The so-called sleep break was a regular thing. Some would pick up their sewing, others a book, pipe, or a wife. It was also the time when most children were conceived. But going to sleep in a properly made bed dressed in a nightshirt was a luxury enjoyed by only the elite of Vilnius. Regular citizens lay down on the benches or on the floor, covered themselves in a long sheet, and were happy if it was even just a bit warmer in their room than it was outside. City laws required the people of Vilnius to be indoors at night. Going outside was only permitted if one carried a lantern, and only on urgent business, like going to a tavern, for example, where ale, mead, vodka, and blood flowed freely. Courts received regular reports about the joys of public drunkenness. The shoemaker John, for example, was beaten up by a group of Tartars, and his friend lost 2 fingers. An organ player, also named John, woke up the trumpet player Grigori at 3 o'clock in the morning, so enraging him that John soon stopped breathing. Meanwhile, a Jewish man by the name Esker, overcome by somewhat more complicated emotions, tried to get under the skirt of a tavern owner named Anne. The woman resisted, so Esker punched her in the teeth, robbed her, and ran away. Those arrested for a crime would often end up in the hands of the torturer. According to local laws, the night hours were the time reserved for the Vilnius enforcer to torture lawbreakers. There was also no sleep to be had at night for street sweepers and guards, cooks and bakers, thieves and prostitutes. Though prostitution was illegal in Vilnius, secret brothels operated further away from the city centre. They were most busy whenever the ruler's court was visiting the capital. Night was also associated with one particular city ritual. As in other places in Europe, the city gates of Vilnius were shut at sundown, but life, such as it was, would continue in and around regular city courtyards. It wasn't a very diverse life. Neighbours would gather, chat for a bit, swing a few punches at each other, and then disperse. To keep the noise and number of scandals to a minimum, the city's tradesmen and merchants were required to stand watch at night. There were also hired guards who'd keep their eye on the city gates and patrol the dark, scary streets. A full moon was sometimes the only salvation. The first lanterns only appeared in Vilnius barely a couple of hundred years ago, although lighting had been maintained around the lower castle area since the mid-16th century. Only now and then, during the main holidays and celebrations, would the whole city centre be bathed in light. City Hall and the other principal buildings would be festively illuminated, an orchestra would play in the open air, and fireworks would shoot up into the sky along the Neris River. For the average Vilnius resident, nights like these would finally bring the promise of a more interesting sleep break.